Welcome to the living room where we live, listen, and learn together. I'm glad that you all are hanging out with us today. I appreciate your followership, your support. The feedback that we've been receiving has been great. And we want to continue to encourage you to share the love of the living room. We want to invite as many people as possible on this growth journey together with us. So how have you all been doing today? I hope that life is becoming sweeter. We know that we're in a phase of life now where cities and states are reopening, and there's some controversy about that. We're not going to dive too deeply into that right now, but we hope that you are still taking the safety precautions necessary to have a safe transition back into somewhat of a normal way of life that we were accustomed to. I'm excited to welcome and invite a very special guest to the living room today. She's a friend of mine. We've been growing together, tracking together as young professionals, as young Christians, striving for goals and aspirations for a number of years now. Her name is Miss Claudia Allen. And before we invite her into the living room, I just want to let you know a few things about Claudia. Claudia is an educated young woman, having earned her Master's of Arts degree in English from Georgetown University in 2015 and a Bachelor of Arts in English Literature with a minor in leadership from Andrews University in May 2013. She is a prolific writer, having published in the likes of Message Magazine, Spectrum Magazine, Adventist Today, and Adventist Review. And she has also written for blogs like Against the Wall and Pelk Power. You can follow her in conferences and forums and see her work in the likes of Adventists for Social Justice, the National Public Affairs and Religious Liberty Conference, the Lake Region Conference Public Affairs and Religious Liberty Forum, the Conference for the Association of Black Adventist Religious Scholars, and the Georgetown English Graduate Student Association Conference. You should know that Claudia, this is how deep she is. During her junior year, she was awarded the Heart and Soul Award from the Michigan Campus Compact for dedicating time, effort, and personal commitment to her community through service at Grand Valley State University. And what I love about her is that she is an educator at heart, whether it's through her speaking, her writing, her teaching, her guest appearances on various televised platforms. She is dedicated to informing and inspiring the people of God to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with God. Claudia's favorite scripture is Philippians 2:13, for it is God who is working in you both to will and to work according to his good purpose. That's the formal bio, my friends, and there's so much more that could be said from that. I have known Claudia to be a dedicated, committed person, one who knows how to set goals and is not afraid to pursue them. And I'm just happy to welcome my friend Claudia Allen to the living room. Claudia, welcome to the living room.
Man, Rich, yo, you found stuff that I forgot about. Yo, that was good.
You're
That was
just deep
dope.
like that. Your
No,
reputation
dude.
precedes you.
Man, listen, I tell everybody all the time, yo, Richard always introduces me the best, yo. That was amazing. Completely forgot about that award junior year. That was great. Yeah. I
And
was
there's so
surprised
much
at
that
that
has
one
happened.
myself.
There's so much that has happened in your life since then, and we're going to get a chance to hear from you just about what life has been like. Just by way of introduction to give the people a little bit of who you are, a little bit more of who you are. My first question is, how are you living?
Man, you know, considering I'm living well, I still have employment. My family is safe. I have the ability to connect with a variety of people on virtual platforms. So I'm living well. But I'm also struggling, man, because I have been in this apartment by myself for like 10 weeks, like back to back, no human contact. I
Wow.
called my friends a couple times and I was like, yo, them 3 kids you got under 13, send them here. I'm so lonely. I will have a conversation with a 5-year-old at this point. Like I would just love some human contact. So I think that that's probably been like the biggest struggle for me. Like every once in a while, like I just break out and like go to Chick-fil-A. I put on a mask, I some gloves, and I just get in the drive-through because I'm just like, I feel like I'm in prison. I need to see some other humans, have some kind of contact. It's crazy.
Definitely. I can totally relate. I can't relate in that living by myself, praise God for my wife, but I can relate in terms of that need to see other people. Like you said, for the
Hmm.
past several days, several weeks for many people being sequestered to their homes. I mean, you can have Glade or Airwick plugins in the wall so that your house is smelling good or your apartment is smelling good. You can be, well furnished and everything's clean and pristine, but there is no substitute for having the voices of friends in the atmosphere and to be able to sit at the same table together. So I feel you in terms of amen, and I'm grateful that you are still employed, but the struggle is real. And I have no doubt that there are persons who right now who are listening can relate to that. How have you been navigating that struggle from maybe a self-care perspective, having already given voice to the reality that, yo, Rich, I'm living life and I'm satisfied, but at the same time, I'm kind of struggling. What's been your attempts to cope with that? And you don't have to feel as though you have it all figured out. Just kind of share with us.
Yeah, man. I think it's something that I haven't, or I won't say that. I think I don't know the answer to it because everybody's trying to protect themselves and protect
Mm-hmm.
their families. So, one thing that, my small friend group has done is, we've done like virtual get togethers.
Okay.
So, like a friend of mine was supposed to have their baby blessed in April. And so we did a virtual baby blessing. Like a bunch of
Wow.
us came on the Zoom and just went around and just started kind of pouring into, I think he was about 4 months at the time. And so just kind of pouring into the parents, into, our little homie. A friend of mine another guy in the group turned 40 in May. So then we all came on Zoom again, did like a virtual birthday party, went around, did affirmations, played games. And then there have been other times where we've just either group FaceTimed or gotten on Zoom again just to kind of come together and talk and hang out and check up on one another. So those have been very helpful for me. It's made me feel like, okay, you know what? Even though I can't get to them because they're in Owings Mills or they're in Baltimore or whatever, which is about 45 to 50-minute drive from me, there are ways that we can kind of stay connected and, just maintain our friendship and kind of check in on one another. And so that's been really great. But at the same time, I also recognize that as badly as I want to like physically see them, I recognize that, everybody has their families and everyone's trying to be safe. And so wanting to respect the space that people also ask for and are trying to maintain, that's also been interesting to kind of navigate and get yourself in the mindset of just like being okay with that. And me being okay with being in here by myself, with my thoughts and like, hey, it's not that bad. This is some time for personal reflection. I've moved furniture around. My room isn't even the same. I've purchased bookshelves and pictures that I've hung on the wall and all kinds of stuff. So I think that it's been a great time of recreation, as well as a time for rediscovery and even a time to find new ways to stay connected to the people that you love.
So you're a basketball fan. You play basketball.
Absolutely.
Who's your favorite team? Do you have a favorite team?
Okay, so this is complicated.
Okay.
I was born a Bull, all right? Because I was born in the 90s in Chicago. My family is from Chicago. Like, I was born a Bull, all
Okay.
right? Over time, I became a Celtics fan, but
Wow.
I'm particularly a fan of um, Doc Rivers Celtics,
Okay.
with not Rasheed Wallace, but my
Paul
homie,
Pierce,
uh, Paul Pierce, Kevin
Kevin Garnett,
Garnett,
Ray Allen,
the Ray Allen, of course. I'm trying to remember my point guard.
Isaiah Thomas.
No. Oh,
Oh,
I'm
Rajon Rondo.
just Rajon Rondo. There we
Yeah.
go. Yeah, like that little dynasty, like those were my homies. Those were my
Okay.
boys. So I rocked with them. Once you get into kind of the more current um kind of season that we're in with the NBA, I kind of am a fan of the Warriors just because I'm absolutely, of course, a fan of Steve Kerr, and then of course a fan of Steph Curry.
Right.
But I don't really have much loyalties. I think once, you know, the Bulls kind of dissolved, hashtag the last dance. And then once, the Celtics also dissolved, I was just like, I feel like the NBA is not here for it. And so they're trying to do some very interesting things strategically in terms of trades and things like
Right.
that. So I was like, I don't think you can really be a fan of a team right now in the same way that you used to be like back in the 90s and stuff. Because I
Right.
feel like right now it's very who is the one person that you're like dedicated to kind of a thing.
I would agree. I think that over the past maybe 20 years, there's been a shift from team loyalty to player loyalty. I think
Mm-hmm.
that LeBron James might serve in some regard to some degree as the poster child of that player loyalty when he had the big
Mm-hmm.
announcement going from Cleveland to Miami, back to Cleveland, and now to LA. On one hand, it was really exemplary of player ownership, taking ownership of his own destiny, that I am committed to my family, to myself, and to the game, but not necessarily
For sure.
to any individual city. Whereas before that, you pretty much had players who, even if they did play on different teams, they were identified still maybe with, say, Scottie Pippen. He's for the most part
Mm-hmm.
identified with the Chicago Bulls, even though he has played for other teams. Or you have your Magic Johnsons, Larry Birds, Michael Jordans, who for Kobe Bryant, where I came
Mm-hmm.
is where I ended. Of course, we must shout out for our DMV people. Yes, Michael Jordan did play for the Wizards
Mm-hmm.
for a couple of seasons, but still, even he would be identified with the Chicago Bulls. So you're from Chicago.
Absolutely.
You
Absolutely.
were born and bred a Chicago Bulls fan. So I'm going to assume that you've seen at least one episode, if not all 10, of the what many are calling one of the greatest documentaries ever, or one of the greatest documentaries, at
Absolutely.
least in recent years, The Last Dance. The last two episodes.
Absolutely.
What
I
did?
finished the last two episodes last night, literally. Because
Okay.
on Sunday, you were talking about self-care with COVID. I literally left, went to DC to like some marina
Uh-huh.
to just think. So I was like, I had to get out the house. So I missed, and I completely forgot that the last dance comes on Sunday. So I'm
Right.
out here at the water, and then I get back in, and I'm like, oh, it was the season finale.
So
Doing all
what did
this
you think?
self-care.
What did you think of the series? What were some of your impressions, lessons that you've gleaned? Yeah, how did you engage with it? What was your experience like with The Last Dance?
Oh my goodness. There's so much, but I totally agree. The Last Dance is one of the greatest docu-series I have ever seen, and I love watching docu-series. I think the thing that first comes to mind is that anybody that wants to suggest that you can compare Kobe to LeBron, compare Michael to LeBron, compare Michael to Kobe. I think after you watch this docu series, you see that that's not possible.
Mm,
And so I think that just the conversation alone around, has Michael been eclipsed? Has another player come and outdone him? I think the fact of the matter is that's you cannot watch all 10 episodes of this and be like, yes, to that question. I
right.
think after 10 episodes, we have all just kind of come to agreement that there is no LeBron, there is no Kobe, there is no Dwayne Wade, there is no Derrick Rose, there is no any of these guys without Michael. And so, if anything, they are all patterning themselves after Michael. But the other thing that I found so fascinating that I don't think I realized, probably because I was so young, was just how large of a personality he was globally. Like,
Yes.
I was not aware of, like, he was basically like Michael Jackson, Beyonce for basketball.
Definitely.
Like, everywhere he went, like, people were screaming nonstop. And he was in another country and people were screaming his name. Like,
Literally.
so I don't think that I was anywhere near aware to the level of extent that people were a fan of his at all.
I would agree that as a basketball fan, as a basketball player for most of my life, of course, you are aware of Michael Jordan, his gravitas. I mean, just how far and ahead of any other basketball player during his time, and some would say even afterwards, that he is. I mean, he stands as the true North Star, the gold standard of
Mm-hmm.
basketball. But like many people who watched the documentary, we were informed, especially if you were a child of the 90s, and of the
Mm-hmm.
2000s, definitely, and of the
Mm-hmm.
2010s, even more definitely. You were probably informed for the first time in a very substantive way of really how iconic Michael Jordan as a brand was and still is.
Mm-hmm.
2016 in 2016, it was 2016, my wife and I had the chance to go on a mission trip to Tanzania. On one of the days while we were in Tanzania, we were heading to Mount Kilimanjaro, and we were going to
Nice.
go on a short hike. We weren't going to climb the entire mountain, but we were going to kind of scale some of the paths. And so there was winding roads through kind of the wooded foresty areas. And I'll never forget, we got to this one intersection where the roads were very small, and we were on a kind of a coach bus of sorts, and then there were other buses slash taxis, and on the back of one of the taxis there, they are decked out, like the exterior, they have the what are they called, where you basically put like a body kit basically. So instead of just red
Mm.
paint, it's going to be like paint and pictures and all that stuff. And on the back of one of them was this big Jordan, the jumping man symbol. And I
Oh,
said, this
wow.
is amazing. In the forest jungle portions of Tanzania, you have Jordan's symbol, and everyone
Mm.
knows what that means. And so when you think about
Mhm.
that, just the idea of not even the words Michael Jordan or just the branding alone, just the genius of it all. So for
Mhm.
me, it was the price of fame. And there was one scene
Mm.
in one of the episodes where he said, this is not a lifestyle you should envy or desire. You know,
Mhm.
people often say they want to be Michael Jordan for an hour, for a day, for a week. And he
Mhm.
says, I would ask them if they would still want to be Michael Jordan after being him for a year. Here's a guy, grew up in North Carolina,
Mhm.
small town, you know, even if he did
Yeah.
dream of, superstar bright lights status, I think that what his experience has become was probably far and away more than what he ever dreamt of. Sure, I want to be the best basketball player on the court, but man, now to have the burden and the pressure of anywhere you go in the world, past and even now in 2020, it's not the same as an ordinary individual.
Mhm.
On that note,
Mhm.
having heard him say that, how do you receive
Yeah.
that? Would you, Claudia Allen, still say, I'll try it? Give me fame for a year. I want to know what that's like. Or are you kind of like, no, I take his word for it. And I'll take
Yeah.
word of any other person who has a degree of fame for it on this notion of fame and notoriety, especially when fame now, quote unquote, is accessible without the large platform of being an NBA superstar. You can be Instagram famous, you can
Right.
be Twitter famous, you can be Snapchat famous, or you can be YouTube famous. What is your, as a young adult, what's your notion of this idea of the need to be seen, the desire to be affirmed,
Mm.
and the illusions, or if there are illusions of fame? Kind of
Yeah.
engage that for me. I know that might be kind of a worded and layered question, but
No, it's a great one. Um, I know that that was something within the documentary that really hit me as well. I don't think I have seen, and I don't think anyone has seen, just the mental, emotional, and physical toll that Michael Jordan was going through at that time. And so, camera angles are key. And so it's like they, close up shot, they're right in his face.
Right.
And, they're asking him, and he's saying, I don't know anybody who would want to be Michael Jordan for a year. It's like looking in his eyes, and you have the Be Like Mike brand and sayings and all this in your head. It really just puts things into perspective.
Definitely.
Even when he was, I know you remember that scene when he was in his hotel room, he was just laying on the couch, and he was like,
Right.
I mean, I don't even want y'all in here. I mean, you're in here because you have to be. It just is what it is. Like, I was like, wow, there is absolutely there is a stress, there is a burden that comes when every aspect of your life is no longer private.
Right.
And I think that that's something that this particular generation with social media doesn't take into consideration at all. Because I think back then, you really did have to be something to be famous.
You did.
There was no social media. There was no strategy. Like, you had to be epic at what you did. And I think that Michael, he was not trying to pursue that kind of visibility. I think he was trying to pursue excellence in his craft. And he had what I would say is potentially an unhealthy desire to be number one.
In anything he did.
In anything he did. It did not matter who he stepped on. It didn't matter if he offended you. He had to win. You are going to help me win.
Yes.
If you don't help me win, we're going to have a problem. Okay.
Whether you're not my teammate, it doesn't matter.
Irrelevant.
Yeah.
Completely irrelevant. I have to do this. Even if we call it the flu game, but clearly the poisoned game, like the food poisoning game, right? Like, it doesn't matter how I feel. It doesn't matter if my foot is broken. It doesn't matter if I've got issues going on at home. It doesn't matter if my father is murdered. I am going to play, and I am going to win.
Anything becomes a source of motivation.
Anything. I'm even going to make up comments from opposing players so I can be mad enough at you to beat you. That was fascinating. I think that considered, though, I think puts things into perspective, because right now I don't think people are pursuing excellence in their craft. I think people are pursuing visibility. And
Ooh.
I don't think that that's any fault. Well, it is a fault, but it's not exclusively on them. I think that social media has created this culture to where if I'm always seeing that Rich is doing something dope, I gotta be doing something dope.
Right.
If so-and-so is making videos, I gotta make videos. Like, if this is how people are being seen, then I gotta be seen. And so I think that there is, instead of people kind of like hunkering down and saying, I want to win at all costs, I want to be the best lit teacher, I want to be the best preacher, I want to be the best community organizer, I want to be the best whatever it is I do for a living, rather than saying I'm going to put all my time, energy, and resources into perfecting my craft and literally being the number one person at that thing. I feel like instead people spend a lot of time, energy, and resources in being visible at doing whatever their craft is. So it's like, I want you to see me being a teacher. I want you to see me being a preacher. I want you to see me being a community organizer. Whether or not I'm the best one at it is actually irrelevant, as long as I'm the best at showing you that I'm doing it. That's all that matters. And so you have people who are social media famous or YouTube famous or what have you, they have hundreds of thousands of followers because they're really good at being visible, but not necessarily really good at whatever it is that they do.
Right. And that principle is so powerful. And for those listening, mark it down, take that. You don't just want to be visible. You really want to be effective. And I want to say a few things about that in response to it. For the person who might be listening, who is striving to create a platform of any kind, we're not saying that there is no place for visibility. I think what
Right.
we've seen over the past several decades is what was amazing. You mentioned camera angle, that Michael Jordan did not have the luxury or the burden, depending on how you want to describe it, of having the camera in his hands. So that's one of the advantages we have. The camera
Wow,
is in
that's
our
great.
hand. The camera is in our room, our living room, our kitchen, our bathroom, our in the airplane, 32,000 feet in the air. The camera's in our hand. If you notice, wherever we had the chance to observe Mike, the cameras or camera was in someone else's hand. So there was no luxury to say, I don't want any cameras in my room tonight. I'll just send you all video footage to curate. Anytime footage was needed, the camera needed to be in someone else's hand, from the locker room to the coach bus to the airplane, to the workout facility, to his car. Think about now how we have the advantage of putting up tripods in our cars where the air condition comes out, and then we'll just press record and we can be seen as we're driving. Then the camera had to go with him wherever he was, in whatever country or city he was in, Olympics, finals, playoffs, baseball, the camera had to be there. So with that, you're right. What was in his hands, and he said this, and I thought this was profound, was his effectiveness. He said, anything that is of success behind the Jordan brand starts with how I play on the court. If I were scoring 2 points a game, if I were a lousy, lazy player, man, people would not like my shoes as much. What fuels the brand is my performance on the court. And that's what I work at. That's what drives me. That's where I glean and garner a sense of satisfaction and fulfillment. Was he business minded? I'm sure you better believe over time his business acumen increased, because his parents told him in the early 80s, you would be quite unwise to deny this Nike deal. He couldn't see what it was going to become, but thank God for his parents. At least I'm sure he does thank God for his parents to say, hey, that wisdom helped me out a lot. And so I think that principle that he probably had by default, because he didn't have what we have. Now, for those of us who have the camera in our hands, it's nothing for us to, and we see so many examples on each end of the spectrum, each extreme, where there's a person out there who all they have is an Android device or an iPhone or a webcam. And man, they have built businesses, platforms that are changing lives. But then there's the opposite extreme, where there is poor stewardship of the camera in our hands. Either it's just very self-interested, or it can even be destructive. I mean, people have been taken advantage of. And so I think that principle you shared is so profound for our generation, for the generations after us, especially during a time where I think over the past several weeks with the pandemic, there has been a revival of sorts, or a reawakening to connectivity on a online platform. Even right now, as we're recording this, we are using something that enables us to see one another. But I think there is a call to stewardship when it comes to visibility. On one hand, from a societal standpoint, it's been called high voyeurism, that people just want to look in, right? I don't necessarily want to learn. I just want to look in. I just want to see what's going on. This is why the Snapchat or Instagram story feature and Facebook story is so intoxicating, because now instead of people actually posting, remember when these things first came out, you just had to post the picture and your engagement was by level of commenting or liking. Now I don't need to post. I just need to post a temporary picture or video so I can just watch in. And so what can easily happen, to your point, is we can decrease an emphasis on actually being effective, on actually developing expertise. And that drive can be misapplied and misplaced to where it's just, as long as the lighting is correct, as long as the visuals are stimulating, then that will be sufficient. What I'm learning, however, is that, listen, the difference will always show when the time is right. There were excellent players who made it to the finals with the Bulls, but it was just that difference that came through at the last minute. And so on this notion of drive and effectiveness, as I was familiarizing myself and refamiliarizing myself with some of the accomplishments that you've been able to have in your relatively short life, we're both young. We're not old.
Yeah.
We're not as young as we once were. So all things considered, in these first 2+ decades of your life, you've been able to reach a few milestones, You still have aspirations in the future, but let's pause now and kind of look back over some things. What amazed me, and I didn't
Yeah.
mention this in the reading of your bio because I knew we were going to get to it here. You, and correct me if I'm not wording it correctly, you were instrumental in creating and implementing a new minor or emphasis or concentration in your alma mater and your department, Andrews University, Baylor
Yeah.
History Department. Is that true, or is that hearsay? And if it is true, help us
Yeah.
understand, because I think you're probably the first person that I know personally who has been instrumental while a student in implementing a minor or a major in a school and a department. Yeah, how did that happen? And catch us up.
Yeah. So, when I was an undergraduate student at Andrews, there was this thing called the Undergraduate Leadership Program, and it was kind of in a pilot phase. Like it just started. And by the time I became a senior, things were going really well, and they ultimately created like a leadership minor within the undergraduate leadership program. But whether or not you were going to do the leadership certificate or do the minor, you had to do what's called a change project. And so my change project, I went to the chair of my department at the time, Dr. Doug Jones, and I was like, Dr. Jones, I've got to do this change project for my leadership thing. And what I want to do is I want to create an African American studies class. And I would like for the class to be mandatory. I'd like it to become one of the, kind of GE courses that any English major has to take, because what I was noticing is, and I see this at Georgetown, Maryland, Andrews, wherever I've been educated in English, you can basically major in English and not read a Black text if you don't want to.
Mm.
And I just found that to be so problematic, because I want to specialize in African American literature, but I still have to read Victorian lit. I still have to read British lit. I still have to read, white American lit. So I have to be proficient in all of these subjects, while in addition being an expert in Black lit. And you just get to come in and say, well, I'm only going to do Victorian. I'm only going to do British. I'm only going to do white American. And I just found that to be super problematic. And so, I went to my chair and was like, hey, Dr. Jones, let's create this course. And Dr. Jones looked me in the face and was like, I mean, we could. That just seems a little beneath you. And I was like, what do you mean? And
Wow.
he's like, Claudia, I just think you could do much more. I feel like you could like create a minor. I mean, if you want to make a class, I mean, we have one class. Like, if you want to make another class, okay. But I feel like you could create an African American Studies minor. I
And
said,
how old are you at the time? How old are you when he's having this conversation with you?
I'm having this conversation fall of 2012, right?
So that's almost 8 years ago.
I'm That was almost 8 years ago. I think I was 20.
Wow. So you're 20 years old, and this
2000, I was
professor
born
says
91. So
you should do a minor. 20 years old.
yeah, he's like, class. What is this? You, Claudia, I see so much, greater for you. And I just want to note, not that this should matter, but Dr. Jones is white. I think that's key.
Okay.
Douglas Jones is a white male professor who looked at his young Black female student, who at the time really didn't have a mentor, because my mentor, Dr. Joseph Warren, had passed away.
Right.
And from cancer. And so he was like, this girl is the only girl we have in this whole program that wants to do Black lit. And there's absolutely no one in here to support her in that. And so I came thinking that I had a great idea. And he was just like, I think I have a better one. So I left just feeling so psyched because I was like, man, Dr. Jones literally gave me the okay to create an African American Studies minor. And he said he'd support me. So I'm
Sure.
like, in my mind, the world belongs to me. Okay. So I go back home, I start thinking things through. And basically, what I created, to make a long story short, I created a interdisciplinary African American Studies minor housed out of the history department. At the time, there was a Black female professor named Dr. Catherine Silva, who was in the history department. And so I got her to agree to kind of direct the program. And so we couldn't house it out of the English department just because there was no one there with kind of that expertise and skill set to direct the program. And so I was going through bulletins because under their advising, they said, well, Claudia, just know that once we present this to the undergraduate, curriculum committee for implementation, they're going to want to know how much is this going to cost them. And so the less money they have to pay, the more likely they are to implement your program. So I identified every single Black faculty member across the entire campus and began to just look and see, like, are there courses already in the bulletin that have some kind of Afrocentric focus? And the fact of the matter is, yes, the answer to that was a resounding yes. My mother was the chair of the nursing department at the time. She had taught a course in the bulletin that was focusing specifically on racial disparities in nursing healthcare. Dr. Cliff Jones and Dr. Trevor Oreggio were in the seminary. And so they were teaching courses on, Christian ministry, particularly in African-American contexts. I obviously had Dr. Catherine Silva in the history department teaching about the Great Migration. I had the Harlem Renaissance course in Lit. I had people in behavioral sciences. I had people in psych. So I was actively going through the bulletin and identifying, okay, this course already exists. This professor is already on faculty. So I just kind of put together a minor that I believe, oh Lord, I think it was 15 credits. I think it has to be 15 credits in order for it to be a minor. So I think it was between 15 and 18 credits. And kind of strung these courses together, but then realized that we were missing some key coursework in order for this to kind of have some cohesion. So I then created those courses. So the two courses that we were missing were kind of an intro to African American Studies course. And then we were also kind of missing an African American leadership course. So given I'm in a leadership program,
right,
I made African American leadership course, and then I created an intro to African American Studies course, and then I also created another kind of intro to African American literature course, because though they had the Harlem Renaissance course, they didn't actually have a survey. So usually in English departments, you can, and Rich, you know this because you're my partner in
right.
English major life. Usually, right, you have a survey to British Lit, a survey to Victorian Lit, survey to whatever, and then you also kind of have your topical, more in-depth courses in those fields.
Sure.
Well, they had the Harlem Renaissance course, but they did not have a survey in Black literature. So, so created those three, added those to kind of the list of courses that already existed in the bulletin, and identified the teachers that would agree to teach those courses. But I also went a little further and I went down to Notre Dame. Notre Dame is about a 30-minute drive from campus. So I went down to Notre Dame because they already had a very stellar African American Studies department. And so I spoke with a couple professors, one being the actual director of the African American Studies department down there at the time. I don't think he's there anymore. His name was Dr. Hugh Page. So I met with him and he gave me just some great feedback on how to create the minor, how to structure it, the rationale behind it, some more text, resources, different things like that. But then he also agreed to partner with the university so that students who take the minor in African American literature at Andrews can participate in any of the ad hoc African American studies programming at Notre Dame.
Wow.
So if we have any speakers, or if we're doing any, committees, different, things like that, you guys can travel down and you guys can attend that as though, because you're a part of this program. And then I spoke with a couple of professors who taught within the program, to just kind of get their feedback on structuring at least the courses that I was creating.
Mm-hmm.
And so got that all in place. And then I reached out to, because Lake Region Conference is kind of a support, or they sit on the board for Andrews University. So basically what I did was I got a letter from the president of Lake Region Conference. I got a letter from all of the chairs of the various departments that were going to support the minor. And I also got letters from the faculty who agreed to teach within the department, saying, on letterhead, I needed that joint to be as professional as possible.
Definitely.
So everybody basically came in, wrote a legit letter saying, I am in full support of this program, and any way that I could help, whether that is financial or whether that is through teaching or whether that is through advising, I'm here to do that. And so after kind of putting all that together into a nice little packet, I then created a full proposal that included the syllabi for the courses that I taught, that included a full breakdown of all the credits, teachers, who was going to be doing what when, as well as kind of a philosophical teaching background or foundation for why the program needed to exist in the first place. And then presented that at our, what do we call that? I think it's Change Project Day. I can't remember what they titled it, but the day you present your change project,
Kind of like a symposium.
that. Yeah. And so presented that, and I had actually invited Dean Keith Mattingly, who at the time was the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. And so he's the college that would have housed the program. And so once I finished presenting, he stood up and said, I'll do everything in my power to get this passed.
Wow.
Day of, closing sentence.
You have
do
my
you guys
support.
have any questions? And he stood up and said, she has my support. So that was kind of the first step to getting it implemented. That went well. Now, the reality is I had to graduate. So, because I presented that in April of 2013, I graduated in May of 2013. So once I graduated, then it became kind of in the hands of Dr. Catherine Silva. And so she had to actually present it to the undergraduate curriculum. I couldn't do that. So she just kind of took my work, went in there and was like, here is what we're doing. This is the plan. And they were all down. So technically there is an African American Studies minor on the books in the history department at Andrews University, but due to unforeseen circumstances, Dr. Silva Banks left. And so there is no one there to direct it. And so if you are a student or someone that is interested in studying at Andrews, you can't necessarily take it. And unfortunately, just due to time, so many of the faculty that I had gotten agreements from have either retired or moved on in their professions. So the minor definitely needs some revisiting and some rebuilding. And a friend and colleague, Michael Nixon, who's the VP for Diversity and Inclusion at Andrews, is kind of in the process of kind of revising it, bringing it out of the cobwebs and figuring out what needs to be done to get this thing implemented so students can actually begin to partake in it.
So let me just, for those again listening, and I'm sure people are quite overwhelmed with amazement. Before you graduated, with your undergraduate degree and minor, which, by the way, you were the first student to graduate from the university with a minor in leadership.
Yes.
So
Yes.
for this minor requirement, you have to participate in a change project. And yours was to create a minor program. Shout out to Dr. Jones, Dr.
Doug
Douglas,
Jones. Yep.
Douglas Jones, for the encouragement, for the catalyst, and
Yeah.
the inspiration, which you then pursued. One of my mentors says that most great projects are 10% inspiration, 90% perspiration. So thankful for
Listen,
Dr.
right?
Jones'
Yeah.
inspiration, but you still had to invest sweat equity to get it done.
Absolutely.
April,
Man.
you finish, you submit, and then you graduate in May. That's profound. And I hope that there is some young person or older person listening right now who can appreciate the reward of work plus inspiration that you could have, I'm sure, and you gave a very great overview, but I'm sure there are details that you could dive into to say this could have been derailed or this didn't have to really come to pass. And I just want to affirm you that is something that I think for the rest of your life you can look back on, and for others who have been given privilege into hearing this portion of your story can be inspired by, to say, whoa, you are listening to, in the living room today, my friends, a living legend, someone who is before, she's not 50, she's not 60. God has blessed her so that there are some historical and legendary imprints, and we're hoping that through whether it's Dr. Nixon or others at Andrews, that this opportunity, which so much went into, will be able to be quickened again and revived, and others will have the opportunity to study. So thank you for investing in Black history and just history in general, because it's not just Black history, it's institutional history that I think the entire campus of Andrews University is added to and receives value as a result of your work. For me, this just further emphasizes your sense of drive and commitment to commitment to excellence when it comes to intellectual pursuits and academia. Who would you say were/are some of your inspirations when it comes to that drive and commitment to excellence?
And, not to be cliche, but the first person's got to be my mom. Shawty is actually quite ridiculous.
Shout out to moms.
Shout out to moms. She was one of the first people to get her PhD in nursing from the University of Illinois at Chicago. She graduated in 3 years with honors. Her mentor and advisor, Dr. Marguerite Dixon, came up to me when she found out that I got into my PhD program. She was like, "I'm so excited for you, Claudia. I'm sure you'll finish in 2 or 3 years with honors." I was like, "No, I'm not Karen. No, I've got 5, so I'm gonna take all 5."
Yes.
Thanks. But yeah, she is a beast in her own right, and she absolutely raised both my brother and I to be extremely driven, and excellence was the only option.
Sure.
And so, we even had to confront her one time. I think this was maybe 3 years ago now. We were just like, "Yo, Mom, we don't know how to enjoy our accomplishments." Because, I was trying to understand, I had graduated from Georgetown and I was completely unfazed. I was unsatisfied. I wasn't necessarily happy. I wasn't proud of myself. Mad people were writing me "Oh my gosh, she basically went to this semi Ivy League school. Everybody is turned up. Everybody is, my mother is proud. The whole family is proud. Everybody is having the best time." I was absolutely just kind of okay, it's fine. And I was not okay with the fact that that was my response. And so I was trying to understand, why am I reacting like this? And that's when my brother and I were just like, "Yo, she created this ladder that's absolutely unattainable. You have to keep climbing. It has no destination at the end of it. But you have to keep going. You have to get bigger. You have to get better. It has to be excellent. Everything you do has to be excellent." And so, yeah, we definitely hit her with that. And she absolutely responded with "Yeah, I know, I did that on purpose."
She was unfazed.
She was unfazed. Clifford and I thought we had an epiphany. We thought that we were presenting some kind of new knowledge to her. She absolutely was like, so I'm glad that you're now aware of what's been going on.
Right, right,
Where are you in the process of climbing the ladder? Like, how you
right.
feel? Do you need a drink of water? Do you need some juice? What do you need as you continue to climb? Just keep on going.
Sure.
So I definitely would say that she is the reason why I am kind of on this perpetual, what is the next thing? What is the next thing? What is the next thing?
So you graduated from Georgetown with your master's in English, and you
Yeah.
commenced your PhD program in English
Mhm.
at the University of Maryland,
Yeah.
specifically in 19th and 20th century African American literature. Where are you at this point on that journey?
Yeah. So I successfully passed my foreign language requirement last semester, so like November of last year, November 2019, which was huge for me because I had failed it once before, but then I also tried to take a class and failed it. So I was really feeling like I can't do this. Like I
And what was
can't.
the foreign language?
Spanish.
Okay, so you're feeling
And so
like
I had
I'm not doing it.
this, I'm not doing it. I had taken Spanish in high school. I had gone up to the intermediate level of Spanish in college, but I kind of let it go. And I felt so bad. I could literally hear Profe Perez and Profe Sanchez in my head because they were always like, Claudia, you can be fluent. Like I hear it in you. You can do this. But I like did like the minimum requirements to get the A or the B plus that I could, and I didn't kind of keep it going to actually learn and be able to speak the language. So once I finished that sophomore year of undergrad, I literally never touched Spanish ever again. And then came to like basically like 6, 7 years later and needed to take a translation exam in Spanish. That's basically what the foreign language is. They take excerpts from a primary source, so like a novel. They
Right.
take excerpts out of the novel and they take excerpts out of like a work of criticism, and then you have to translate those texts from those excerpts from Spanish into English. And so you don't know where in the book they're going to pull the excerpts from. You just have to
Yep.
translate
You have
them.
to translate it.
And so that was a very difficult thing for me. And I genuinely did not think that I was going to pass that at all. I didn't.
So talk to us about, because this I'm sure will dispel a lot of myths when it comes to higher education and just the pursuit of terminal degrees. And really, this would help anybody, high schoolers who may be listening, college students right now, and those who are just getting into grad school. How did you feel when you failed the course?
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is against the backdrop of academic excellence was the mantra. Moms didn't
Right.
play. It was a family value. You all, whether you wanted to or
Sure.
not, you had to adopt it. It was indoctrinated. And most of your, if not all of your academic journey had included the markings to prove that. But here you are
Mm-hmm.
now at the premier academic level, PhD. All right, we're going forward, and boom,
Yeah.
you failed. How did you feel? What did you feel? And how did you,
Yeah.
who was instrumental, if there were persons who were instrumental in helping you get beyond that?
So I actually, so even like more background, my parents actually got divorced in the midst of all of this.
While you're in
So
your
I was
PhD
all
program.
absolutely while I was in my PhD program, while I was studying for my exams. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I was in a very difficult emotional space on one hand as well. Like I went into a very deep depression and lost a lot of motivation to
Yeah.
do anything. And so I think that being in depression, and at the time I was not getting counseling, like I was sleeping multiple days at a time, just, calling out of work, not teaching. It was a lot. So I think that dealing with that and simultaneously trying to take a foreign language exam, fail, then try to take a class to pass a foreign language exam. The first class wouldn't let me into the class because they were like, we don't accept PhDs. And then I took another class through another school, failed that. So dude, I was just feeling hopeless. I felt really hopeless. I felt really broken. I had no, I did not know what was going to happen. I had kind of resigned myself to the notion that I just wasn't going to get my degree, actually.
Sure.
Because I was just like, man, like I have to get this benchmark in order to go to the next level. And I can't pass this benchmark no matter how hard I try or what I do. And then on top of that, I also didn't even have the motivation or the desire to reach the benchmark. I was literally in an emotional place where I was like, I actually don't care. Like,
Yeah.
if I don't get the degree, I'm actually perfectly fine. The world might feel away. Everyone else will be disappointed. Everybody's been waiting for Dr. Allen. I'm perfect. I'm very straight. Like that's the place that I got to. And really my friends and my family, I think were very instrumental in the sense of they prioritized my health when I needed them to, rather than kind of prioritizing the degree. And so I think, if they were pushing me like, you have to get this, you have to get this, you have to get this, I think that would have shut me down. And I do think that my mom was kind of on that tip for a while. I don't think she kind of wanted to receive what I was dealing with emotionally. So she was very much so, get your hips up, figure it out, push, do it.
Yeah.
But so many of my friends happened to, and you want to talk about God, it was just such a crazy coincidence. The majority of my friends that are in my close inner circle work in mental health.
Wow.
And so while I was literally kind of like dissolving and crumbling, they're seeing what's happening. And so I'm in denial. I'm perfectly fine. I'm high functioning. I'm gonna keep going to work. It's like Jordan. I'm gonna play with the food poisoning.
Yes.
I'm gonna play. It doesn't matter. Like I got to play. I got to show up to the game. And they were very much so like, oh no, wait. I don't think you understand. I don't think you understand what's actually happening to you. Sit down.
Yes.
Okay. And they had some very real, and it didn't take one conversation. It took several conversations over several months to get me to accept that I had depression, and that I needed to go see somebody. And so them kind of prioritizing me in that moment and really forcing me to acknowledge my feelings and acknowledge that I will never reach my goals. I will never get back to being that driven, successful, goal achieving girl that I was prior to this moment. If I do not heal myself, I think that was what I needed. So that those friends, I consider them to be my family. Like nothing can happen to them. If they needed anything, I would leave and I would get it for them because they saw me in ways that I don't think anyone else ever did or ever has. Because it's like, in spite of the lights, in spite of the achievements, in spite of everything that I was doing, they very keenly were like, she's not okay. And we have to help her recognize that she's not okay. And that we need to support her, come alongside her and figure out, how can we help her be okay? And so I really do believe the only reason I passed that foreign language exam was because I took a year off. I went to counseling. I focused on my mental health. And then I came back to school and just put that grind, put that hand to plow. And with God's grace, passed it.
I think that that's encouragement and admonition to a person who is opposed to pausing. They might have that similar pedal to the
Mm-hmm.
metal mentality and feel somewhat that pausing, especially for maybe counseling or just taking a break, would be, it's a sign of weakness, maybe. Or that if I
Oh
don't get it
yeah.
done at the certain time, I think we all struggle with that. I think that's one of the things that might come with having a measure of success, that past success becomes now the measure for future success, whether it has to do with the grade, the letter grade, whether it has to do with
Yeah.
the uh the degree to which it was distinctive. Oh man, you were instrumental in implementing a major, a minor rather. So you're definitely going to knock
Mm-hmm.
this PhD out of the park. But I think your story reminds us that, one, we cannot always account for the unforeseen waves that can knock
Mm-hmm.
us down. You're marching
Yeah.
through childhood, through your teen, tween years, through adolescence, adulthood. You finish graduation. Major moments in life have had, as a part of the picture and as a part of the memory, my family unit in this way. Masters, boom.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're marching. I want to join not only my mother, but the great college of PhDs, Black female PhDs. Boom, this news is broken to you. Was that
Yeah.
by way of a text message, email, sit down
Mm-hmm.
conversation? How did that happen? What was your point of receiving that? And I'm going to a second question with that, but I would like you to share with the listeners that initial moment, because I sense there's kind of like a almost BCAD reality to it.
Oh
It's like life
yeah.
before that. So what was that like?
Yeah. Man, so it was September 2016, and it was kind of a conference call. So my mom texted me in the morning and said, "Hey, we need to talk to you real quick." And my brother still lives in that area, so I'm the only one that was long distance. And so the four of us got on the call, and he said what he said, and that was kind of it. My brother and I were both very shocked, kind of alarmed. Didn't really. It's just kind of it was it's just one of those kind of like, okay.
Yeah.
Um, I think I was silent for a bit. Clifford kind of chimed in and really tried to convince him to stay. Um, and then I ended up deciding to kind of chime in and back him up on that. um, but yeah, it was to no avail. And so I think he actually came to my whole family came to a social justice conference I had planned in November. So all of them came. Everything seemed like it was fine. So then it was like, okay, well maybe things are working out. Um, I don't ever kind of fully know because I'm in Maryland and they're in Michigan. And so but basically they came, they left, and he never went back into the house after that time. So I think that there is most certainly a what is it a B what I'll call it BD before divorce,
Mm-hmm.
AD after divorce, um, because I think that it didn't become real immediately. I think in your mind you still think, um, oh, it's cool, particularly when they're gonna have a conversation, everything will work out, it'll be fun. I think that once you get more and more phone calls and more updates, and you kind of get the finalized, hey Claudia, we have signed the divorce papers. I think that's when stuff gets real.
Yeah.
But I think by the time their divorce was even finalized, I was good. I think the hard time was kind of that middle ground where we didn't know, where he was or what he was doing or what the plan was or anything like that. And so that it just took a lot out of me emotionally. Um,
Right.
my brother and I would reach out to him. He wouldn't respond. And so there is certainly just feelings of anger,
Mm-hmm.
feelings of confusion, feelings of disappointment, feelings like everything that you have taught us up to this point, you've completely thrown out the window.
Mm,
Um, all of our previous kind of moments together as a family, you begin to kind of question their legitimacy. Did you want to be there? Did you want to leave earlier? You then begin to kind of replay in your mind moments, and you kind of read into them. So it's like, oh, well, was he not talking in this moment because he didn't want to be there? Or, did he have an attitude on this day because he wanted to leave? You start to project onto
yeah.
things um, in your childhood and adolescence, that and you just start to just think things over in ways that you just previously didn't. um yeah.
So it's definitely like history is subject to revision, or at least the feelings of revision and reinterpretation in light of, new realities, new
Yeah,
information.
yeah.
So I invited you rather to share that for the next question, which is, you shared with
Hmm.
us there wasn't an initial decision to go to counseling. On
Hmm.
There was some who said, hey, just push through. That there were friends who keenly observe, you need to kind of pause and take a step back. And I remember, for this was probably, a year or so ago, you and I were texting, and you were like, Rich, man,
Yeah.
I'm on a break right now. And I remember saying,
Hmm.
I said, I think that's good. And not to equate myself with the friend circle that you're referring to, but I'm just saying, I remember you
Hmm.
at that point, I think, had owned the break and saying,
Yes.
this is where I am. That's what I'm trying to say. You'd own the break. You're saying, I want to pause right now.
Hmm.
I'm just kind of focusing on some other things, and we'll get back to it when we get back to it. And I was like, hey, I support that. I think that we should all learn to better prioritize, our whole health. So when you finally listened to, because you said it wasn't initially, they had to kind of keep telling me, you kind of want to think about this. When
Yeah.
you finally resolved to say, okay, I'm going to take a break and I'm going to sit with someone, was that difficult in the sense, like, when you sat with someone, where you still kind of like whatever? And then B, what did you glean and gain from that experience? Because there's still a stigma to counseling and therapy, especially in the
For
Black
sure.
community. And I think sometimes there are layers to that stigma, so that a person might think, well, if I have degrees and if I have success, money, land, cars, name brand clothes, you name it, we
Right.
can we can use anything as an excuse to say it. And I surely don't need and can't benefit from a therapist or a
Hmm.
counselor, or we'll say, well, this isn't trauma, or this isn't that bad.
Right.
And we'll kind of
Yeah.
compare. We'll even make ourselves feel bad to say, well, somebody else is really going through, so I shouldn't, go and occupy 45 minutes of somebody else's time. It could go to someone else.
Hmm.
So once you finally, maybe you
Right.
entertain some of these things, but once you finally did say,
Hmm.
okay, I'm going to go avail myself to this resource and these resources, like I said, was it, as soon as you sat down, it was like, I should have done this a while ago? And
Hmm.
B, when it finally began to kind of integrate into your life, what was that like, and how has it brought you to who you are and where you are today?
So I'm so glad you started with basketball and you started with Jordan, because I have realized so much of my life is intimately attached to my experience playing basketball. So I don't know if maybe you do know, I don't know if you know, but I have a really bad knee injury in both, where my kneecap dislocates. And
Right.
so it's been doing that since I was in like third or fourth grade, right? So I wear a brace. But I have played basketball games and my knee has gone out and I will still play.
Wow.
So
Wow.
I have a history of playing injured.
Mm.
And so what I didn't, yeah, it's good, right? It's good. It's
Whoa.
great.
Yeah, yeah, I'm with you.
I have I have a mental framework of playing injured.
Mm.
And even though I knew I was injured, I had this mindset that it doesn't matter, you play anyway. And it was a Friday night. I was driving to a Vespers, and I was playing Lecrae, and I had a great class. the day went perfect. And I kid you not, I just started weeping like out of
Mm,
nowhere, just like like uncontrollable, could not stop crying, and was crying for hours, like 4 hours straight.
mm.
I'm driving on the way to this church, I'm still crying, and I'm listening to gospel rap crying. Like Lecrae is making me
Yeah,
weep.
yeah.
So once I get in, I park, I clean my face. I think that I have made myself presentable so that when I get into this Vespers, no one is going to notice that I've been crying all afternoon.
Hmm.
When I got in there, immediately, um, my my friends that, some friends of mine that were in there, they were like, oh no, 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 no. You're not gonna come in here and sit like we don't know there's something wrong with
Yeah, yeah,
you.
yeah.
Like, what are you doing? I was like, yo, I'm good for real. They're like, you're not. But since we're in the middle of a program, we're gonna let the program end and then we will come back to you.
Yes, yes.
Um, and so yeah, that was, I think that was the day that it finally kind of hit for me. And
Yeah.
I always tell people, when you're crying to a Lecrae album, you should probably go see somebody.
That that might be the telltale sign. Just
Just a little
maybe.
bit.
Yeah. Okay.
So at that point that I went to the school and kind of got myself on a waiting list to be seen by a counselor
Hmm.
in the center. Um, the first appointment it was great. My counselor's name, I will always give her a shout out, Dr. Pepper, Dr. Pepper Phillips. I just called her Dr. Pepper because
Hmm.
obviously,
Right,
um,
right, right.
she was dope. And I am such an advocate of like Black therapists, but
Mm,
my particular counselor was a middle-aged white woman.
wow.
And I just want to say that I do recognize that sometimes what you need is someone that can relate to you and can understand you from a race and gendered point of view.
Hmm.
But man, Dr. Pepper was everything that I needed, regardless of her race and
Yeah.
age.
And if I might
She
just
really,
join with
yeah,
you
go
on
ahead.
this note, I would agree wholeheartedly. In the times where I've gone to counseling, and I have no qualms about sharing now, because I actually think my mind is shifted in that counseling for me is no longer just a resource post trauma or post crisis
Mhm.
or high stress moment. That it can be just as much a resource for you as going to the gym. Like this could be a part of your
Absolutely.
lifestyle. So that's why I have no qualms about sharing. So I go to counseling regularly now because for me, it is a part of my lifestyle. It helps me decompress to kind
Wow.
of think about things in conversation and correspondence with someone who is trained and has expertise and gifting in being able to help me think through feelings and your thoughts and your actions. And so, but anyways, both of my counselors, past and present, have been Caucasian males. And I would agree with what
Okay.
you're saying that there is definitely a need for counseling that kind of mirrors maybe your experience culturally. There's
Hmm.
some insight. Um, but I still think that Christian counseling, that's my bias, Christian counseling, and not to say that other forms of counseling or lanes of counseling can be beneficial, but Christian counseling really does, no matter what the person's ethnicity is or cultural affiliation, man, if their commitment is to pointing us towards wholeness as it is in Christ, it's beneficial. But I
Hmm.
just want to co-sign with you for
Oh yeah, that's great.
the listeners who might benefit from that shared consensus, that it's not just you. I would definitely agree as well. Now continue. You're sitting down with her, you're going through
Hmm.
you know what
Yeah.
gets you to the
So,
point, and I'm not assuming that it's done, but what gets you to the point where you are
yeah.
now?
Man, I'm gonna be honest. I ran out of sessions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so technically I was allowed 8,
Right.
but Dr. Pepper saw that I was in such crisis. She actually gave me like 3 additional ones
Right.
and was like, I know I'm technically supposed to stop these, but you're not ready. You have
Hmm.
to, I need you to come back. So she did whatever magic she did. And I kept seeing her. And really, she was the one that encouraged me to go on the leave.
Hmm.
And so she was like, hey, because I was in there saying I was going to quit. And I was, going to figure something else out.
Right.
And she was very much so like, well, before we kind of get there, um, why don't we just go on a leave, go on a mental health leave, take the time to kind of reflect and figure things out for yourself. And then when you come back in the fall, I think you'll have a better idea of whether or not you want to quit, which
Okay.
I thought was great. I think that what counseling did for me was it gave me language and an understanding for a variety of the things that I have experienced in my life. Things that I did not previously take into consideration. It's counseling is why I can say I have a tendency to play injured.
Yes. Yes.
Like, BD Claudia would not have been able to say that.
Right.
And so I think counseling has also made me aware of areas of my own weaknesses, my own shortcomings. It has made me aware of things I experienced in my life that were traumatic or harmful, that because of my own upbringing, certain things have become normalized. So I didn't even think there was anything wrong going on, or that whatever happened to me was a mistake or was a bad thing. There are just certain things that I had become normalized to.
Mm.
Um, one I'll share is just like verbal and emotional abuse.
Yeah.
I knew verbal and emotional abuse was a thing. I just didn't think I was ever experiencing
Right.
it.
This is just how we talk.
This is just how we talk.
Right.
This is just how things are. It's fine. And so I think that I encourage so many people to go to counseling. And I'm just so glad that you said, what you said about going to counseling in terms of just maintenance,
Hmm.
and not waiting for the crisis. I think so many times we, particularly as Black people, we wait for the crisis. We wait for the moment where we crash against the wall. That's basically what happened to me. I literally had gotten to a point in my life where things were compounded.
Wow.
My parents got divorced. At the same time, I'm failing in my PhD program. At the same time, I'm dealing with drama at a church. At the same time, I'm dealing with, insecurities and things from my past that I never even dealt with in the first place. So
Right.
it's like all of this stuff is compounded at the same time. And I got to a place in my heart and in my mind where I could no longer function.
Hmm.
So this is not Jordan playing on the broken foot. This is not Jordan playing with food poisoning. This is Scottie Pippen playing with a bad back injury.
Right.
He couldn't play. He had
Right.
to get out. So at some point, I think you have to kind of like identify and be able to differentiate between injuries and
Mm.
and recognize that, at some point, some stuff you can't keep playing on, or
Yeah.
else it's gonna make it worse. At some point, you have to say, you know what? I'm not even me anymore.
Yeah.
Like my personality is gone, my motivation is gone. Um, and if I really want to be me, I need to see somebody. And in going to counseling, she literally, it's like being emotionally constipated.
Hmm.
Going to counseling, she literally like created an avenue so all that stuff could pass through.
Yeah.
And so I could process all this stuff and I wouldn't have to be so clogged.
Right.
And I could at least go back to some semblance of function. Now,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be clear, my friends, just yesterday, they're just like, Claudia, your work is not done, sis.
Right.
You're making decisions and doing things out of your pain points. You're still, operating out of your trauma. You're still operating out of your insecurity and your fears and different things like that. And so it's also why, even though, yes, I had to stop counseling, for finances and, things with the program. So I went as far as I could, and then they had to stop them. I still know that I have to go back.
Right.
Like, I've got to get myself into a situation where I'm back on somebody's couch, because there's more to flesh out, because, things come up in not just in your professional life, but you see things in your romantic relationships. You see things
Definitely.
in your friendships. You see things just in your personal engagement, how you do things. And so I just feel like counseling gave me the breather that I needed. It gave me the language for everything that I have experienced. And it then gave me the tools on how to process and just push all that stuff through, so that I could just be a healthier me and just get back on track with everything that I do want to be and everything I do want to accomplish. That the fact of the matter is, you cannot accomplish when you are emotionally hurt, when you're
Yeah.
emotionally injured.
Yeah. Listen, first of all, I want to say a word of gratitude. We want to say a word of gratitude to all of our counselors and therapists out there who
Yeah.
are really engaged in a work that often goes underappreciated and underestimated in terms of its value. Thank you to our counselors for the help that you have given and continue to give on a personal note. And I love what you said about how it offers language and concepts. That was probably one of the first things I said after my first appointment, that I received
Mm.
language that helped me to identify and give voice to feelings, or, a way of approaching and responding to life. Because, you know, most of what we do is in an attempt to survive, to create identity and meaning, whether individually or in relationship. And like you said, things can be normal, but doesn't mean they're healthy. Um,
Right.
so for me, what I learned, and it was almost in passing, but it was so revelatory, because I was conveying to
Mm.
him some things rather. And he said, "Oh, you're an internal processor," or "This is what it sounds like." And I said, "I think that's right." And
Mhm.
as I thought about it, I said, "Yeah." And I feel like that is positive or advantageous in certain areas. So as a pastor preacher, a lot of what I do is reflect, right? I'm constantly thinking
Yeah.
and processing, whether it's scripture or a story or some concept, or trying to make decisions. I'm thinking to myself, but I can definitely see how that same tendency can be the source and the root of a lot of unhealthy behavior. So I'm
Mm.
sure friends close to me might say this, but I will cite my closest friend, my wife. I've shared this story before, and I'll keep it brief. Early on in our marriage, it became clear that when I wasn't using my words, my facial expressions and my body language was still speaking for me. And she
Mm.
would
Mhm.
say, well, what does that face mean? And I'm becoming defensive, like, yeah, I'm not making a face. What are you talking about? And so after rounds and rounds of that, it became clear that there was something that I was doing and giving off. So without going into the story that kind of helped me realize that I was making a face, which is quite humorous, and we'll probably share in another podcast episode. When I came to that realization, I said, oh man, I am making these faces, which I've probably been making for the greater portion of my life, but just no one was in such close
Mm.
quarters as your new spouse to say, okay, it seems like whenever you're agitated or irritable, you're not saying what it is, but I'm still getting this sense or this vibe. And so fast forward to counseling, and it made sense that, well, what that is you have a tendency to go insular with your thoughts. And what happens is that default, like for you said playing injured, for me processing internally, if you're not learning to articulate, if you're not able to identify, or if you feel, if you convince yourself that for the sake of the other person's feelings, it's best for you to just remain silent, then what can happen is,
Mm.
again, using that constipation metaphor, you can just be piling things in and suppressing and suppressing and suppressing. But the visual that is being depicted, whether it's through facial expression or your body language, is your whole
Yeah.
body's way of letting you know, some stuff needs to get out. So it's similar to if you're constipated, if there's never a release, there are going to be signs that still say something's wrong,
Absolutely.
whether your stomach's hurting or not. And after that goes on for so long,
Yeah.
you won't be able to do other things the same way. You won't be able to run and play sports or just sit and watch television because you're like, yeah, I got to go. And so it's the same thing emotionally. So once that language was offered, is my point, the language and concepts, that helped me to say, wow. And that was kind of my first session. And it really was a foundation to help us get to other areas, whether it's been cognitive behavioral therapy. These are like 3 letters I live by now. TFA, thoughts, feelings, actions, that all of us are in an interplay of what we're thinking, how we're feeling, and what we're doing. And they're connected to one another. And if you're not taught this, you can easily think that I don't have control over my thoughts. And what I'm learning by that is, what I mean by that is that if it enters my mind, or if it's a feeling that I'm feeling, that it must have a high level of legitimacy and it must need some kind of active outlet. And that's not necessarily the case. So an example of that might be for the person who just feels like, well, this is just how I talk. Like they're very mean, very vitriolic, they just cuss people out. Well, you're trained in thinking that when you feel like this is the action. The action is, I'm going to give you a piece of my mind. That's not the case. There are always other options. So this is just illustration again to connect with you on the fact that you're right. When you actually do get a chance, and sometimes for those listening, it's not always going to be your first counselor, your first session is so revelatory. Sometimes it's more of an uphill battle, or uphill journey rather. Sometimes you might have to go through the work of trial and error and say, yeah, me and this person aren't connecting. Because you're still building rapport. These are human beings. Yes, they have expertise. Yes, they have gifting.
Absolutely.
And hours under supervision. They're licensed, but still they're human beings. And just like any relationship, even for the purposes of counseling, it still takes time to build rapport. So there's a level of patience. And then there's the financial component that there's an expense to it. And so for those who are working tirelessly to make more affordable and accessible therapeutic resources for those who don't have access, or whose dollar is split 1,000 different ways, and counseling might be helpful, but they just can't. We thank you all for that. Claudia, we can go on and on and on and on about this and so many other topics. I mean, we haven't even dealt with all the other questions, so I guess you'll have to be a guest again, much like you're always a guest at our church every first Sabbath, every first worship service, every Sabbath, first Sabbath of February. Claudia has been my guest speaker at my church, and our commitment, so long as the Spirit agrees and our lives extend, she will be the guest speaker wherever I'm pastoring. To all my future members, whoever you are, and I'm not, whoever you are, wherever you might be, just know that's going to be on the calendar, first weekend in February. But
That's it.
That's it. I want to say thank you for your candor, your vulnerability, and sharing a lot of how you're living. That's what we do here in the living room. We listen that we might learn for the sake of living. And we've learned today from you that life can be unpredictable, but life can also be filled with lessons and accomplishment and success, even at a young age. And your life is still going. It's ... There are a lot of things that are on the horizon that we are praying for, rooting for you in, and hoping for. I want to close like this. Just a few kind of rapid fire questions, and just kind of whatever comes to mind. The first one, is there a quote that you live by? And if so, what is that quote?
Yes. I'm glad I literally just went to it. So Toni Morrison has a quote. First of all, Toni Morrison is my favorite author. And so she has a quote that says this: "This is precisely the time when artists go to work. There is no time for despair, no place for self-pity, no need for silence, no room for fear. We speak, we write, we do language. That is how civilizations heal. I know the world is bruised and bleeding, and though it is important not to ignore its pain, it is also critical to refuse to succumb to its malevolence. Like failure, chaos contains information that can lead to knowledge, even wisdom, like art." Absolutely favorite, John.
Powerful. We'll make sure to put that a link to that in the show notes, everyone. And then finally, if you could send one text message to the future you,
Whew.
what does that text
Future me,
message
not
say?
past me.
Future
Ooh,
you,
that's good.
what does that text message say? One text message.
One text message to future me. I would probably ask, are you happy?
Wow.
Yeah.
Mercy.
Are you happy? I have so much on my mind right now, just thinking through my professional track, relationship. There's just so much in my head. And I just am wondering about a variety of decisions. And I think the question I would ask future me is, am I happy?
And in my mind, I can see that dot bubble come up,
Right.
waiting for the response from future you. And that's kind of what we have to wait for, to see what the answers to that question would be. Claudia, M, Allen, thank you for joining the living room.
You're
We
so
have
welcome.
learned as we have listened, and we are more committed to living a life of fulfillment as a result of spending this time with you. And we appreciate it.
Yes. Listen, I'm so grateful. I never get asked these kinds of questions. So I've gotten to talk about things that I rarely get to talk about, which I really, really appreciate.
Tell the people how they can track with you, how they can continue learning from you. What are some of your social media handles, your platforms that you would like the people to know?
So you can follow me on Instagram and on Twitter, though I'm rarely on Twitter, at Kamal, Camal 365. And then, of course, I am on Facebook. I'm also the online content manager for Message Magazine. So, you can follow Message at 1898. You can follow Message on Facebook and kind of see what we're doing there. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. If you're in need of a speaker, an author, a clinician, a lecturer, 2 thumbs way up, I highly recommend Claudia Allen. You will not be disappointed. Well, folks, that's
Thanks,
all for
bro.
this episode of The Living Room. Thank you for hanging out with us. We hope that the time spent has been well worth it. And we're looking forward to continuing to listen and learn that we might live. Until next time, I'm Richard Martin. Thank you to our special guest, Claudia Allen. Might the rest of your day be blessed.